1, 2, 3, 4. When I was young, I had a lot to say. So I learned how to sing, I learned how to play. You said you were mine when you heard my song. After all these years, you still sing along. The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things we'll never forget.
Hello and welcome. My name is Maria Belcher, and I'm the Executive Director at FestivALL Charleston, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another wonderful episode of Three Things. We are on Season 5, Episode 6, and before we get started, I want to give a special thank you to our sponsors of Season 5, West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Farmer Klein and Campbell, the University of Charleston, MVB Bank, Taylor Books, and the Charleston Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thank you to our season ticket holders and to all of you for tuning in. We're so glad to have you with us. I invite you all to follow along with FestivALL at festivallcharleston.com and on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Be on the lookout for programming updates, promotion of artists as we head into the holiday season, and so much more. But with that, I will introduce now the founder and producer of Three Things, Mr. Jeff Shirley. Take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for joining us for Season 5, Episode 6 of Three Things, My First, My Favorite, My Future, where we will hear stories from three professionals based around the themes of first, favorite, and future. And what we as an audience hope to gain from that is how they got started, what they love about what they do, and where they would like to see themselves down the road. I don't give my guests very much instruction other than to just follow the themes of that. And that gives them the freedom to approach the task from any angle that they wish. Before we get started, I want to thank my sponsors again, as Maria just did. I want to thank my team at FestivALL, Maria and Mallory and Mallory. I want to thank my technical crew, Patrick Stevens and Ruben Shirley, and Ian Bodie and Lauren Allen for their art. And I also want to thank the Three Things trio that sang and performed the theme song that you heard at the beginning there. Mark Davis, Larry Gross, Michael Lipton, and John Ingram. We have a very great lineup tonight, so let's get right to our first guest. Filmmaker Calvin Grimm is a West Virginia State University graduate, and his latest award-winning film, River of Hope, tells the story of that school's founders. It is available to watch on Amazon Video right now. I got to attend a screening of this movie a little bit early, an early edit of the film at the Empty Glass, where they were doing a preview for the cast and crew. My wife worked on costumes for this film, so that's how I got in to see that. And that's where I approached Calvin and asked him to be a guest on the show, and thankfully he said yes. So he is working on a new project that I hope he tells us a little bit about. Please welcome to talk about his first, favorite, and future, Mr. Calvin Grimm.
Check one. Hi, I want to thank Jeff Shirley for having me on today. I think what he's doing with the show is really great, promoting art and artists here in West Virginia. He probably already mentioned I'm Calvin Grimm. I grew up in the other Virginia, and I moved to West Virginia in high school. To talk about my first something, my first camera I actually used for any film work is what I'm using right now. It's a little bit grainy, but I figured it would have a nostalgic effect. It's an old Sony CyberShot. Filmed my first commercial with it, probably in 2011 or 12. It was a cheap Best Buy pickup. It had a video function, so it worked for what I needed. That commercial was actually for a friend of mine's jewelry company, Damian Dibble. Shabui is the name of her company. She's still at it and doing great work. My big first, though, I would say, in the production world was 37 Fallen. It's a feature-length documentary film. I started filming that with a fellow student, fellow co-producer, Tyler Miller, also a fellow veteran of the military. We started that in 2013, and I was doing a lot of student film projects at West Virginia State University over an institute, and I really was getting kind of bored, I would say. I really wanted something that I could really sink my brain and my heart into, and doing, commercials and little PSAs for a grade, it just wasn't cutting it for me. So I wanted to really sink my teeth into something that was meaningful for me. So I started looking at different topics, and I had just returned to West Virginia in 2011 from being gone for 8 years from West Virginia, serving in the military, both active duty and as a contractor, including a tour to Iraq in 2006 to 2007. And I really wanted to do something as a tribute to the other troops that left post 9/11, but didn't get to come home. And at that point, there was 37 West Virginians that had been lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I wanted to do some sort of a tribute to them. I also had noticed, when the first few Iraq and Afghanistan vets had been lost in combat, they were being covered on the Today Show. Their families were being interviewed by, A-list reporters, making national news. And then gradually, as the subject got less attractive in the media cycle, these veterans' names who lost their lives, they were at best being reported as numbers. We lost 10 in Iraq this week, 7 in Afghanistan today, so forth. And it was really kind of disheartening, because it was, these guys were still losing their lives, still are, and at that moment, I think once I kind of had thought about that story and wanting to make a tribute to those guys, that kind of made the decision on what I was going to do. So I set out to do a feature-length documentary film, and we pledged that we would release it on Veterans Day 2014, and that's what we did. We drove over 10,000 miles with the microphone I'm wearing right now, actually. The microphone cost more than the camera we used. I guess that's a pointer for, if I had to give any advice to younger filmmakers, always focus on your audio. A lot of times your audio is more important than the video quality, especially with documentaries and stuff. You can get fancier toys later. That should never be your focus. Yeah, we drove 10,000 miles across the country. I think like 5 of that, maybe 6,000 was just in West Virginia, driving around to meet with these veterans' families, getting footage of their headstones, their grave sites. Some were buried in Arlington Cemetery, some were buried in Utah, some were buried in Colorado, some were stationed in other states, and we did interview some unit members as well. We had a great premiere. I feel like we did our absolute best to give a tribute to those veterans and their families who sacrificed a lot. Then we were looking for a way to distribute the story after that, and we did. We ended up we kind of thought ourselves to death about it, and then ended up just releasing it on YouTube. It's got thousands of views now, and that was something I never set out to make a fortune on. I didn't really care about making any money. I wanted to really get my feet wet on a feature-length project, how the editing process would go, and which was long. I'll say that when you start dealing with longer projects, adding a few days of filming is not the real bear. The real bear comes when you're chopping up. 90 minutes in a feature film is actually probably 15, 20 hours or more of footage, especially with a documentary. We wrapped 37Fall and premiered it, distributed it on YouTube. Excuse me. And then we went from there to doing some commercial work. I was still really trying to learn some of the tricks of the trade, with cinematography, how to best use the equipment you have, just all the little things that add up to, being able to use the moniker of filmmaker. There's so many little aspects of it that can both be taught in a classroom, but there's a lot of it that can't be taught in a classroom. There's things that come up that someone's an alternator on someone's car dies and you have to move it out of the shot somehow. So you need someone who can work on cars there all of a sudden. And I will say that I think that there's a lot of parallels between military service and filmmaking, just because of the flexibility, the decision making, and the criticism. There's a lot of people who love everything the military does, and there's a lot of people that hate everything the military does. And there's the same thing for some classic movies. There's some movies that you mention and everybody loves it, but there's that one guy that just cannot stand, something amazing. That was our first big project, and then I think getting into some commercial work afterwards, really kind of helped hone those skills. But I learned a lot on that, and that was my first big endeavor. I would have to say, getting into my favorite project would have to be our most recent release, which is River of Hope. River of Hope is my first time directing a feature-length narrative film, as opposed to a documentary, an actual movie. We started on it, I would say. I had the thought that I wanted to make the story into a feature film probably back in when I was still working on 37Fallen even. The story is based on the founding of West Virginia State University, which was originally known as West Virginia Colored Institute. It was the first college for African Americans in the state of West Virginia. During desegregation in the 1960s, the university was an all-black college, and it had to integrate white students, which was sort of the opposite of the story you hear a lot, that's been told a lot about white schools having to integrate black students into their schools. While I was attending West Virginia State University, one of my professors there, Kim Cobb, who's not only a great teacher, but a really, really talented production personality. She really helped me hone a lot of my skills, and was a great mentor. And during her, I took her introduction to audio production course, and then later, they rarely offered it, but there was one semester they offered an advanced audio production course, and I don't know if I was the first one to sign up officially, but I definitely was chomping at the bit to get in that class, and it was well worth it. And we ended up one of our projects, we had to do a 30-minute audio documentary, and which was challenging. At the time, when you've never edited anything longer than 2 or 3 minutes, even if it's just audio, 30 minutes can be a lot. And we were, it could be on, I think she gave us almost free rein on what subject matter it could be. It just had to be informative. And we kind of bounced several ideas around, and the founding of the university itself actually bubbled to the surface. And it's this just amazing story of it's a coming of age for a former slave, Mary Barnes Cabell, who actually married her owner, who allegedly actually loved her very much. It was not the Thomas Jefferson situation where he treated her as a mistress. She lived in the house. They had 13 children together that he raised as his own children, and she inherited the property upon his demise, and was later, through a series of kind of crazy events, was able to use the property she inherited from him to found, or helped found at least, the first college for African Americans in West Virginia after the Civil War. She, to me, is one of the most important figures in West Virginia history, period. And it was, even from the first time I heard the story, I was sort of amazed that it hadn't been told in any meaningful capacity before. It was known in university circles amongst some of the alumni, especially some of the older alumni, I was like, are you kidding me? This is an amazing story. So we rallied a group of local filmmakers, some that have decades of experience, some that had never been on a film set before. We had about 45, 50 people, I think, totally involved, and every one of them worked their butt off to make it happen. It was a challenge. I mean, we had to pull together funding. We had to find period sets. That's one thing about filming anything that takes place in any period of time that isn't today, is you have to find sets that look like that. So we were looking for log cabins, river boats, anything, period costumes, horses, the whole works. And it was a challenge. It was also a really great time. And I think one of my other favorite things about it is we really brought together a lot of community members that are similarly driven to tell stories about West Virginia. And there's so many awesome, beautiful stories about this state of empowerment that don't include mentioning the Hatfields and McCoys, or the plight of the coal miner, or the opiate crisis. Everybody's heard all about all the problems West Virginia has, and both myself and the crew and the cast of River of Hope, we set out to tell a story that changed that narrative a little bit. This is a powerful story about what West Virginians can do, even in the most dire of situations, and that includes being in bondage. We use that momentum, kind of getting into the future of what we're working on. The crew of River of Hope really, we didn't feel like we were done yet. We finished the movie, we premiered it. We had a great premiere at the Charleston Coliseum, formerly known as the Civic Center. It's now available on Amazon Prime. But we knew that there were so many other cultural and historical stories about West Virginia that we wanted to tell, and we also had assembled such a great group. Herbert Gardner, Angelica Armstrong, Stephanie Robinson. She's been me and Stephanie have worked together the longest, actually. She was a production manager with 37 Fallen, and with several commercials we did together, and then on River of Hope as well. Over literally years, we kind of piecemealed together this great team. Stephen Schmidt, David Stevenson, Chris Thompson. I wish I could name everybody. They would take the whole interview to name everyone. But we knew we had something special as far as a team goes. Everyone worked well. There was no bickering. The communication was great. The diversity of our skill sets was great. And our willingness to listen to each other and really get through some difficult creative hurdles while still being able to go out and have a beer together later. Because emotions get high. There's a lot riding on a scene. there'll be a lot of money tied up in getting a scene right. And you know, one actor is struggling with their lines, and everyone wants to kind of, you know, get upset with them, and that's easy to do. But instead, you come together as a team and you work through it, and it really shows. You know, I think our total budget was about $36,000 for River of Hope, and every penny of it we spent as best we could, and we're actually really happy to announce that it just won the narrative feature film of the year at the West Virginia Filmmakers Festival. It was also featured in the West Virginia International Film Festival. Results of that haven't come out yet, but we're really excited about it. And our team, we decided we needed a name, so we came up with Vandalia Filmworks Foundation. We established ourselves as a nonprofit organization because we want to ensure all of our viewers and critics and anybody who has a vested interest one way or the other that you know, we're not out to become rich nor famous. We are dedicated to telling West Virginia stories using West Virginia cast and crew members, and also filming in West Virginia at West Virginia locations as much as we can, which we filmed exclusively in West Virginia so far. We really got hit hard, just like everybody else did with COVID-19, and we actually were working on, and it's still on the back burner, but a pseudo sequel to River of Hope called Road to Vandalia, which was a few of the same characters were gonna return, and it was gonna be more about the founding of West Virginia as a state, our break off from the other Virginia during and right after the Civil War. With COVID-19, however, that really put a damper on our ability to travel, to come together as a group for big shoots, that type of thing. So we really went back to the drawing board and thought about, you know, we had, you know, 5 or 10 really good ideas for what our big next project would be as a group. And we ended up settling on doing something a little bit different for all of us, and that was doing a thriller horror film based on, we ended up basing it on a novel by Michael Nost, Return of the Mothman. We felt like we had really hit heavy on a heavy subject, slavery, and the Reconstruction period with River of Hope. So we wanted to switch gears and talk about some West Virginia lore, and it's hard to talk about West Virginia lore in any sense without bringing up the Mothman. I don't know how many of our cast and crew members believe there really is a Mothman. I'll leave that for the viewers to decide after they watch the movie, I guess. But we actually just this September, or I'm sorry, the first weekend of October 2020, finally got our first couple days of filming in, and it went really well. We incorporated as much COVID-19 precaution as possible. I mentioned our production manager, Stephanie Robinson, earlier. She's certified by the Georgia Film Academy, a great organization for online film training of different flavors. They offer a lot of web-based educational stuff. But you know, we had all masks were worn except by actors while they were filming. We you know, had hand sanitizer galore everywhere, followed all the precautions where we could. And we used a skeleton crew. We used, you know, we scaled down the numbers as much as we could so that we could be, you know, a little more social distanced on set. And, you know, you know, we're really excited about the film. Michael Nost is an amazing author. He's won the Bram Stoker Award. When he did win that for horror writing, he competed against the likes of Stephen King. And he's a fellow West Virginian. He's from Logan. and which was another big factor. We didn't want to use somebody else's source material. We felt like it was very important for us to, if we were going to tell a story of lore and fiction to an extent about West Virginia, that we needed to at least make it of a West Virginia flavor as much as possible. We're really excited about this production. We brought in John Russo, who was the co-writer of Night of the Living Dead with George Romero, which, in the horror genre, that's the godfather of horror films. He basically invented zombies single-handedly and brought them to life with George Romero for the first time. And he did a cameo role. We filmed some scenes with him in it right here at our Vandalia Filmworks studio. And we're really excited. We're still getting our ducks in a row, per se, on the rest of the production, because we're trying to navigate this COVID thing as safely as possible, while also, being able to move forward with the art that we love to do. One thing that's amazing about filmmaking is you're bringing together a visual picture with sound, with writing, and it all emerges as this story to a viewer, and that's the bringing that story together, whether it's The Mothman or River of Hope or 37 Fallen. The end goal is to evoke emotion in your audience, and there's a lot of emotion in West Virginia stories, and that's what we're out to tell. There's a lot of pain in some of those stories, but there's also a lot of hope and a lot of fun as well. So, very excited to share it with you when we're done. Hopefully, it'll be done 2021, midsummer-ish, and. Chris Woodall is designing the Mothman costume. He's a veteran of the horror genre. He's done a lot of, and he's also a great artist, graphic-wise, and also painting, sketching. He designs logos, everything, and also a talented musician as well. He made a cameo in River of Hope as well. You'll see him as one of the assailants that ends up in jail. But really would like to thank Jeff Shirley again for having me on, and hopefully we'll see you next year at the movies for Return of the Mothman. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Calvin, and we can't wait to check out that new movie. Next up tonight, we have food writer and cooking instructor April Hamilton. After living in Charleston for 20 years, where she wrote a wonderful cookbook, Counterintelligence, The Best of April's Kitchen, and a food column for the local paper, this Florida native moved back south to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This appearance was rescheduled from season 1 when she moved away. And so I'm very excited to finally have her on the show. I love her approach to food and to life in general. So please help me welcome a dear friend of mine, Miss April Hamilton.
Hello, Charleston, and 3 Things. Thank you so much, Jeff, for hosting this great show and inviting me back. Back when you could do high fives in person, Jeff and I were walking down Capitol Street, ran into each other, and over a high five, he invited me to participate with 3 Things, and then lo and behold, I moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so I didn't get to do my 3 Things bit. Glad to have this virtual time to do it. Make silver linings with this weird time that we're in. All right, so let's just kick off with I'm April Hamilton. I had April's Kitchen Counter. I still do. April'sKitchenCounter.com is my blog. I was born in the kitchen. Here we go with the first. Yes, born in the kitchen. Kick things off right there with 1 foot in the kitchen and 1 foot in the ocean is what I say. Our house was across the street from the warm Atlantic Ocean, and I would kind of, you know, get a swim most days of the year, honestly, and I still love to swim. So growing up in the kitchen with my mom, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, so I would perch on the kitchen counter right there with my mom. I was her shadow. I still, you know, am at a distance for sure, and just stirring and tasting, and then it would be off to, you know, she'd do a sewing project or something, so I would tag along and watch Julia Child. I promise you, if we could binge watch Julia Child in the 1970s, that's probably all I would do all day long. And a little side note, I did achieve a little dream 4 years ago and go to Julia Child's home in the south of France. So that was super cool. Anyway, growing up in the kitchen, on the kitchen counter, once I sort of graduated from just sitting on the counter, I would push a chair over the stove and get all the spices out and my little can of Campbell's soup and stir and doctor and taste, and that was sort of my first real cooking that I did on my own. And kind of fast forward a few more years from there, I had my nose in every cookbook I could get my hands on and started my own little cookbook collection. So we've got this fabulous throwback Better Homes and Gardens Junior cookbook with this recipe for scalloped tomatoes. And so the fast forward is that my mom was out. I'm in 4th grade, and I want to make this recipe for scalloped tomatoes because I could see we had the ingredients. It was kind of like the prerequisite for if I could cook or not. Do we have the ingredients, or could I, or, you know, some easy substitutes? I learned early how to substitute stuff also. But anyway, Mom was out, and so I'm thinking, oh, it's got a 1/4 cup of butter in it. What is a 1/4 cup of butter? Is it? Oh, I just couldn't think of it. And she didn't have a cell phone, right? We're talking in the 70s, so no cell phone. Couldn't call Mom, and so I just wing it, and I go with the quarter pound of butter. So everyone, kitchen math, butter math. This is a real 1/4 cup, and they even sell it like this right now. This is a real half stick wrapped up of butter. But you know, if you put a 1/4 pound of butter instead of a 1/4 cup of butter into your scalloped tomatoes, I mean, what can go wrong? Nothing. It's just a little extra buttery, a little extra delicious, and there you go. Cooking mistakes are edible and even delicious every single time. And Julia Child always says, don't apologize for your cooking mistakes. So that's the scalloped tomato story in this fabulous little book. And another fabulous book I had was this really super duper throwback. You can see, whoa, the wear and tear on it. It's got some little recipe cards stuck in there. The Betty Crocker cookbook for boys and girls. And I made some little notes in there. But I mean, I have been a bread baker since the 1970s. I made little notes like tasty, gross, sticky. I made my little notes in this funny throwback book. Still have that on my shelf. All right, so here I am, 4th grade, and my sister is in middle school, and she comes home with one of those newsletters from the school, and it says that they're having a cooking class, 6 weeks cooking class in the home ec room. Remember home ec, right? We need to bring it back. But there's this cooking school, but it's for adults. So I say to my mom, like, I'm going to this. I want to go to this. I'm going to go to this cooking school. And she says, well, it's only for adults. And I said, will you please ask if I can go to it, even though I'm in 4th grade? And she says yes. So, a week later, Mom, have you asked? Did they tell? What? Well, no, I don't know. And we were picking my sister up from school one day, and I marched my mother into the home ec room and demanded that she ask permission and gain permission. So yes, they were like, okay, this kid can come to the cooking class, and that was a blast. I mean, we baked all kinds of things. It was for adults, but it you know, me kind of living my little girl dream of, you know, playing grown up, playing with the cooking tools and the fire, and we made biscuits and muffins and eggs. You know, it was nothing like exotic, but it was super fun, and I encourage everyone to take a cooking class, teach your kids to cook, and all that. So growing up in the kitchen led me to want to share this love with everyone in my path. So I started teaching cooking, and it started 30 years ago when my niece and nephew were 4 and 6 years old, and I was back home planning my wedding. So I kind of roped them into a little cooking thing. I noticed that they didn't eat a lot of, you know, varied things. They were little kids, but I just was like, wow, they only eat like celery and chicken. I don't know, really, really limited. And I was like, I bet I could expand that by getting them into the kitchen a little bit, and carried this philosophy with me, like, you know, and until today and beyond. So I decided when I became a mother 26 years ago, I would teach my kids to cook. I would raise them in the kitchen the same way that I was raised in the kitchen. And from the time they were tiny, I would go into their classrooms at, you know, whatever their schools were, preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, maybe even a little bit in the college kitchen dorm room or something like that anyway. And like they just really, really took to it. My kids, the kids in the classroom, parents would ask for recipes or for other tips. It really like was a major sort of light bulb thing. Like, wow, people really are interested in this, and a lot of people didn't really learn to cook when they were growing up. So it was this little talent I had to share and continue to love sharing it. So this is one of my favorite things. Now, in the classrooms, what can you do? You're kind of limited to what you can do in a makeshift kitchen. So it was a whole lot of pancakes. This is a book by Eric Carle. Every child should be introduced to this book. It talks all about where your food comes from. So I don't want to segue too much on that, but we have lost sort of where does the food come from. And just grab the book. It's still in print, and see for yourself about the whole food system. So I'm not going to segue into that too much. But the classroom for cooking with kids, it was eye-opening. It was rewarding. Sometimes the teachers were into it, sometimes they weren't. So I just kind of meandering and looking for open doors and people who welcomed having that cooking lesson, and really loved that, and started actually teaching cooking classes with my friend Louisa. Thank you, Louisa. Louisa found a commercial like kitchen design showroom where we taught practically every topic you could think of. I focused mostly on baking and cooking with kids, and she would do a lot of her travel foods like Thai and her root food Italian, but we just mixed it all up and had a ball. We ended up going to 3 different kitchen showrooms, and that was a total blast. Also, the final kitchen that we landed in is Darren Fisher Designer Kitchen. So thank you, Darren, for sharing your space with us. We had all kinds of fun groups in there, and I'm proud to say I had Mayor Amy Goodwin in there even before she was mayor, but she was, of course, always super cool, and we had a blast in the kitchen. I recruited some of the Mountain Stage friends, and we made ramp biscuits in ramp season, and it was just an opportunity for everyone to kind of let their hair down a little bit and have a little bonding, and then break bread once you've created this meal. If it was biscuits or whatever it was. And a real highlight was also having Larry Gross come in from Mountain Stage, our dear Mountain Stage host. And he and I ended up doing a one-on-one class in there when Junk Food Junkie got, it was the anniversary of Junk Food Junkie being on the Billboard charts. So thanks, Larry. We'll get a little clip of Larry and myself making chocolate souffle. We're separating eggs. We're making kale chips, apple donuts. We had a great time. In addition to the adult stuff, I always continued doing children's classes and programs. One being the Family Dinner Project, which is a group out of Boston, Harvard area, and they came to Charleston. We cooked together. We had a family come in, and we made a little zucchini dish. We had a mom and her 3 young kids, and they did little zucchini ribbons. We sauteed it. They squeezed the lemon. They had a ball. They ate it. They made these beautiful faces when they tasted their creation. So, just really, really rewarding. There's so much learning that you can do when you're cooking with kids. It's really can practically follow a curriculum, if it's math or science or culture. I mean, certainly culture and history go really hand in hand with cooking with kids and sort of school lessons. So there was a program in out of Huntington called Scratch, and the Scratch kids grew fruits and vegetables. They had this beautiful garden, and that's a big shout out to Melissa Stewart who was with Scratch at the time, and we collaborated with the Huntington's Kitchen with the kitchen that Jamie Oliver set up in Huntington, and cooked with these kids. So they made pita and rolled it out. They rolled out this dough and roasted beets, and then they had grown them. They grew the beets, and we roasted them and made like this pink hummus kind of dip. I would give these things some crazy names just to make it not sound like this is some beet dip. It was more like jazzy, pink pizzazz. I don't know. But you just see where I'm going with that. You have a little bit of fun with getting kids to explore some new kinds of foods and things. And I promise you, if they have a hand in the making, they're going to be all about it. They want to taste something that they've helped prepare. Really have been rewarded richly with my own kids taking their early cooking lessons on into their lives, and wrote about that recently for a magazine here in Baton Rouge. So the future, well, sort of for me, the future, I think it's going to be really about writing, and that initiated a few years ago, really like I think 7 years ago, 2013, I started writing my column, and that is big thanks to Rob Byers for saying, okay, you food obsessed person, you can do a freelance column from your house, and Maria Young for coming in. Go Tigers. Maria there in Charleston is an LSU graduate. How crazy is that? And I was writing my column weekly, counterintelligence. So we have this theme here of the kitchen counter. Grew up on the kitchen counter. I have my blog, April's Kitchen Counter, and I have my column and my cookbook, counterintelligence. So writing was just, I wasn't sure, can I write every week about something? That was for my column, and I did the column for 3 years until I moved from Charleston to Baton Rouge. And my mom said to me, oh honey, you're not gonna have any trouble at all writing, because you don't quit talking about food. I mean, that was kind of her summary of me. So she said, you'll never run out of things to talk about. So sure enough, didn't miss a Sunday. I might have missed a deadline, sorry Maria, but never missed a Sunday. And that was a really fun time, and it segued me into doing my blog, April's Kitchen Counter. And then, so the future is a little bit, we took a little detour. So some of you may know, about 1.5 years ago, my daughter had a life-altering accident in New York City, and she's home with us now. She's recovering beautifully. She's doing great. But my life has never had a little tidy roadmap, except for, oh, you go to college, get married, have kids. Hallelujah to all that. It was, there have been detours all over the place, these random relocations from Florida to Houston to West Virginia, where we stayed for 24 years, and now to Baton Rouge, and who knows how long we'll stick around here. The sunshine and the food will keep me here for sure, and the great neighbors and hospitality, etc. But the detour with what I call the trauma timeout with my daughter will lead me down another writing path, and I do want to write a memoir about it. I've told people, if one more person suggests that I write a book about this, I'm going to do it. And she said, okay, you should write a book. So I don't know when that's going to happen. My daughter will have some more surgeries coming up, so recovery time from surgery is a great time to kind of sit and write, not necessarily mindlessly, but without a fixed deadline or whatever. So I do would like to share that story. It's been amazing. It's been hard and tough, but super rewarding and full of joy. And it's been a real miracle. So that's part of our future. We also, in this COVID time, have had our home refill up. We were empty nest, so we had our home fill up with all three of our girls coming in and cooking together again. It's really been a richly rewarding time, and we love to celebrate silver linings. So I think from a lot of this, the trauma time out and the quarantine time, we've got tons of silver linings to celebrate. And I've been doing my blog again. I totally switched from food writing and food teaching, cooking lessons, to Mama Bear. I even have a Mama Bear necklace. I switched into Mama Bear mode and writing on Caring Bridge. So now I got back onto my food blog, and I just made a promise to myself that I will do a weekly blog series. And I started in January, picked a guinea pig who I knew would say yes, and I had my list of 52 friends who I was real eager to catch up with back home in Charleston, back home in Florida, college friends, maybe a chef friend I met just on an off occasion, and shared stories. And so that is my 20 question series on my blog, which has been super fun. It's loaded up with 20-minute recipes. Each person starts off by telling me their 20-minute recipe, and everybody should check that out. We've met a lot of great people also, going forward in the future with my daughter's accident. We've met some incredible people who are also trauma survivors, and those people probably wouldn't come in your path, otherwise. So it's, we just, like I said, celebrate those silver linings. And I finish almost everything I say with my sign off of happy cooking. So let's say here's to the future and happy cooking to everyone.
Thank you very much, April. I'm so glad we finally got to hear your stories. Finally, this episode ends with the West Virginia Humanities Council Director, Mr. Eric Waggoner. He's originally from Malden, West Virginia, and has degrees from West Virginia Wesleyan and Arizona State University. I have been talking with Eric over the last few months since I booked him for the show, but via email or phone calls or text messages, and we've never actually met in person. But I will say he's just one of those people that I already feel like I'm a good friend of, and that I know him very well, and I think you will easily see why I feel like that. So we're very excited to welcome Mr. Eric Waggoner to tell us about his first, favorite, and future.
Hi, I'm Eric Waggoner. I'm the Executive Director of the West Virginia Humanities Council. The Council is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, we help to promote a vigorous program in the humanities all around the state through grants that we provide to nonprofit organizations, colleges, universities, museums, local historical societies, all kinds of local organizations that work with the humanities, and also through developing programs that we send out into West Virginia. It's a really cool job. You get to work with a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of work in history and language and legal studies, archaeology, some aspects of social sciences, anthropology, and so forth. It's a different job every day, so it's a really cool job and a lot of fun to do. I'm very honored and very excited to do this segment of this wonderful speaker series, Three Things, and thanks to Jeff Shirley for bringing me on. You caught me in the middle of taking a look at a book that's currently very hot around my house, Pig Takes a Bath. It's a story of a pig who, you get it. One of the things I really love about children's books is they're very forthright with the title. The title is Pig Takes a Bath, and it absolutely delivers on what it promises. There are other books in the series, there's which is all about processes and how you get things done. There's Bunny Eats Lunch, Pony Brushes His Teeth, and Duck Goes Potty, which is, to me, the most dramatically gripping of all the ones. You're really rooting for everybody throughout that whole process. I'm speaking to you today from this very small nook in the Humanities Council offices, the Jeffords Memorial Library. This is where we keep a modest collection of books about West Virginia or about West Virginia related topics or written by West Virginians, some history, some botany, literature, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, autobiography. And it's fitting because today for my segment of Three Things, I want to talk about libraries, all kinds of libraries. I'm the product of public schools, everything straight from kindergarten all the way up through when I got my PhD in American literature. With the one exception of a 4-year stint at a small liberal arts college, all of my schooling from kindergarten straight up through has been at state schools. And at all of those state schools, one of the greatest resources that was there was the library. And I've always been really close to libraries and felt close to libraries. My dad was a career librarian. He worked with the Library Commission pretty much all of his professional life. I spent a lot of time in libraries growing up, both at school and outside of school. And they've always been places where, like a lot of kids and a lot of people, when they get older, I feel very comfortable. Every library that I walk into, you feel like you know it. You know what's there. You know what's available to you. Or at least you know the spirit in which it's going to be offered. So first, favorite and future. I'm going to fudge a little bit on future, but like I said, I want to talk about all types of libraries. So here we go. The first library that I remember, I'm sure it wasn't the first one that I was in, but the first one that I remember really vividly was the library at the elementary school that I went to, Malden Elementary. It was a T-shaped building, and down the sort of long central vertical span of that T-shape, as you went down on the right-hand side is where the library was. No idea if it's there today or still there today. The school is, but I don't know if the library is. I'm sure if I went back, it would look a lot smaller than I remember. In my memory, it's very big. And it was filled with books and at the time, film strips and all these things that you could look at and pull out and spend a little bit of time with there in the room. Well, as we got older, kindergarten, they bring you in and you're allowed to look at the books and take them and play with the things and then go back to class. As we got up into like second, third, fourth grade, a little bit more mature, a little bit more responsible. I can't remember exactly what the deal was, but I'm sure it was something like they take us out once a week and you could get one book or two books and keep them for a week, read them through, then take them back the following week, exchange them for one or two more. I'm sure I don't remember the exact details, but it was something very much like that. So it was always something that we looked forward to. You got out of class for a little bit and you're able to walk like the 50 feet down the hall to the school library. And as I said, it wasn't the first one I was in, I'm sure, but it's the first one that I remember. And I would love to be able to tell you that the reason I remember that library is because it was something really precocious and smart that I read, like a child's Garden of the Roman Poets or my first History of the Continental Congress, something like that. I'd love to be able to say that. But actually, it was not that. It was a very vivid and violent drawing, an illustration in a book that I took out. Not violent, actually, but the threat of violence. I took out a collection of Edgar Allan Poe. It still weirds me that they keep Poe in the children's section. I always think, as I got older and I read a little bit more Edgar Allan Poe, I thought, what must the thought process be? Like somebody said, well, he wrote that poem about the talking bird. Let's put him over there with the kid stuff. But actually, it's some of the most disturbing and weird and wild and strange and bizarre stuff that you can read as a kid. And, you know, as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, I thought that was very cool. So I pulled out the book, and I remember the cover was a picture of what I now know is Edgar Allan Poe. It was a line drawing, and behind him, sitting on a statue, a little bust, was a raven, and there was a black cat. I found out later that all the stuff on that cover was related somehow to the stories that were inside. So I'm flipping through this book, and I read a story called The Pit and the Pendulum, which is sort of a wild fantasy about a guy who gets taken captive during the Spanish Inquisition. The historical details are kind of all over the map. But the story is about a guy who is taken to be tortured by the Spanish Inquisition. Never really says for what, but he's thrown in this pit, he's thrown in this dungeon, sort of open dungeon area. And he is threatened with darkness and with rats and with blades and all these terrible, terrible things. And the illustration that I remember was of a guy laid out on the table, the wooden table, strapped down, and there's a big blade. That's the pendulum, the big blade that's swinging back and forth over him and slowly descending where he's strapped down on the table. And there are rats on the table kind of up alongside him. And I read the story and I looked at that illustration and I thought, I'm 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, I thought, wow, this is very cool. This is creepy and weird and bizarre and strange. I wonder what else is in it. Like, they'll just let me take this out. I can just have this and read it for a week and then bring it back. I felt like I'd gotten away with something. Like I'd found something that was hidden that maybe they didn't know about. The world was a lot stranger. And the stuff in the world was a lot stranger than I had realized up to that point. And it was scary, you know, it was upsetting in a way, but it was also kind of thrilling. And reading Poe was actually kind of thrilling too. If you're a certain kind of high verbal kid, it helps to come to writers like Edgar Allan Poe very early in life because they themselves are very high verbal. And there's a lot of what we used to call when I was young 50-cent words, a lot of big vocabulary words in there. When you're young and you like reading and you like words, new words are kind of fun. You can sort of work out the meaning from the context as you're reading through the book. Or sometimes you can't work it out. You can't figure out quite what it means, so you have to go to the dictionary to figure it out. And I was that kind of kid. When I came across an unfamiliar word, I wanted to know what it meant. So I tried to work it out from context or go look it up. And that way you can use it later. You can spring it on adults. And this is a lot of fun too. You read through the story and you go, oh man, what's voracious? Like, what's that? I wonder what that means. Go to the dictionary and look it up. And then the next time an adult asks you, you know, hey, are you hungry? You can say, I'm voracious, and really impress them. Where'd you get a word like that? And you can't say, you know, a terrifying book, so you have to say the dictionary, which is kind of true, but not really the whole truth. And it's fun as a kid too to have a secret like that. So that idea that there was a lot of stuff out there, and that you could just go get it, you know, it was just collected there, and you could take it off the shelf, and you could borrow it for a little while, and bring it back. And the realization that the shelves were full of stuff like that. Things you didn't know about, or stuff you hadn't read that you might be interested in, or things that you wanted to learn about that you could just do kind of on your own self-directed hook. That was wonderfully freeing, you know, as a little kid, to know that there were spaces and there were contexts, even in the schooling, even in like day-to-day schooling, which was pretty regimented, where you could just go and find out stuff. Was a very, very liberating idea. The library, I think, in all its permutations, is one of the best ideas, probably as a species, that we've ever had. You know, so many human ideas that they're kind of double-edged swords. You know, you take the good with the bad, or there's some negative that comes as an extrapolation of it, or people can put it to negative ends. You know, we can learn how to split the atom and find out all about that, but then we also have the A-bomb. You know, there's all kinds of stuff in the world that's tremendously complex and scary. Knowledge, you know, with that, the development of that knowledge comes the potential to do some pretty bad stuff. But the library is one of the very few human innovations that I can think of that has no negatives, you know, in terms of its impact, in terms of the effect that it has, or the good that it does in the world. I can't ever think of a situation in which somebody would say, boy, that library was a really mixed blessing, or, you know, it's a shame we had that library around. What a library is really kind of fundamentally in all of its forms is a testament to the idea that information and knowledge are in the world and can and should be made available in a society to everyone, and a society that invests in that monetarily and kind of spiritually a weird word to use, but a library or a society that invests in the notion of a library as a place where information can come directly to people who are interested in looking for it. I mean, that speaks of a tremendous faith in the possibilities, the goodness in all of us. As I say, it's one of the few uncomplicated human ideas that I can think of. So that was my first. It was that shocking drawing that revealed to me, there's a lot of stuff out there, and if you just go look for it, you can there are a lot of thrills that can come to you as a result of it. And as a kid, that was a lot of fun. So that was my first. That was the first one that I can remember. My favorite library, man, that's tough. That's really tough. I worked in libraries when I was in college and when I was in graduate school. I did work study. My first job when I got out of college, when I was working in the world, in the public world, not the academic world, but when I was working out in the world, the year after I graduated from college, I was working in a library for the blind. I later became a teacher. I taught college English for a lot of years. And so I spent a lot of time in libraries. And there are some libraries that you walk in and they're just beautifully made. They're architecturally, they're wonders. You walk in and there are some libraries that have a lot of cool stuff to partake of. A lot of libraries set up now, coffee stations in the corner. You can go in and you can read. And if you're a caffeine addict like me, enjoy a little coffee with your reading. So there are all kinds of spaces, these welcoming spaces in libraries. And a lot of libraries that are really impressive, big research libraries. And all useful to their own kinds of purposes. But I'd say probably if I had to put a finger on one, my favorite in the sense that it was the library that revealed to me what the adult possibilities were, was the library in my hometown, Charleston, West Virginia, the Kanawha County Public Library down here on Capitol Street. When I got a little bit older, when I was into upper grade school and then junior high, what we had was junior high, not middle school. Into junior high, they would take us out occasionally to the big main downtown library. This is a very big grown-up thing for a kid to do. When I got a little bit older and I got my driver's license, I was able to drive downtown and go visit the library. And when I walked into the Kanawha County Public Library, this sort of open public library, not connected to a school, but there for everybody, again, I was kind of knocked out. I'm dating myself, but if you walked in the front door and you took kind of a hard right hook into this little alcove nook area, that's where they kept the vinyl. That's where they kept the record albums. And I took out my first Lou Reed record there. And to my junior high school self, strange, weird, creepy Lou Reed was the same as strange, weird, creepy Edgar Allan Poe. Just a little bit more adult. The subject matter was a little different. But once again, on that trip, when I took that album home and listened to it, I thought, God, Jesus, man, the world is just so much bigger than we ever know at any given point. You think you figured a lot of stuff out, and then something happens, and you realize what you knew was just a sliver of what was available. As I talk here, I find that I'm really not talking about the libraries themselves so much, but what they provided, what they give, what they provide to people who are there and ready to look for it. And it wasn't just the records there at the public library, it was also all the big stacks and multiple floors, every conceivable subject, again, everything from political science to history to literature to botany. I mean, things that you kind of knew about but didn't really wanted to learn more about, things that you never conceived of, things that you never had any idea existed in the world. All of that, in ways, it sounds grandiose, but really in ways the cumulative total of all the stuff that we have learned or thought about or really grappled with and tried to work through as a species. Not just knowledge, but wisdom, the kind of guiding light that comes from what knowledge we feel like we can possess, the way forward and to try and improve things and make things a little bit better. All of that stuff was housed here. All of that stuff was in this space. And it didn't have to be a building. It could be a room within a building like in an elementary school. Or it could be a repository in a college or a university. But something about that collection indicated that somebody had had the foresight to say, this stuff is important. This stuff matters. And making sure that it's in a place collected where people can come and get it and avail themselves of it. That's a worthwhile investment. That's something that we do in the faith and the hope that we can improve on what's come before. Again, I know it all sounds very grandiose for a big stack of books, but it really is what libraries have always represented to me, is that faith, that collecting of knowledge from the past, and the faith that if we put it here and we make it available to people, people are going to be able to take this knowledge and move into the future and maybe make the future a little brighter, a little better than what we have been accustomed to. So, my future library. I'm going to cheat here a little bit on this one, but I want to talk for a second about home libraries, about the libraries in our home spaces that we collect. I became a father very late in life, in my sort of upper mid-40s. Without going into too much detail, my wife and I didn't think we could get pregnant. And I'm sure you can see where this story is going. One day she came home and said, "Hey, you'll never guess what." And I said, "Oh, go on." Not exactly those words, but that was the spirit. So right away we had to figure out, life was going to look a lot different. And one of the things that, now 3-4 years later, from the day we found out, everything's great, it's wonderful. But we got, like a lot of people do, we received a lot of books. We received a lot of baby books and kids books and stuff that we could kind of pack away for our son as he got older. Well, our son, I don't talk about this very much, but he is now he's coming up on 3.5 years old, and he's not really a verbal guy. He doesn't talk as such. He makes noises, he vocalizes, but he really doesn't talk. Language has not been his thing. He's much more interested in patterns and shapes and sequences and so forth, which I understand is pretty common for kids who come later to language. All that said, he's a fantastic communicator. We've never really had much of a problem figuring out what he wants, but he'll direct us. He'll show us. Like if he wants something, a toy or whatever that's up on the shelf, he'll lead you over to the shelf and he'll take your hand and kind of put your hand toward the toy. And you're like, "Oh, okay, I got it." So when he was a very little baby, we'd read to him because he was small and he'd just sort of keep himself there. As he got older, he got a little bit more restless, he got a little bit more antsy, and he was a little impatient with the books. He really wasn't into sitting down and letting you read to him. He wanted to go off and stack things. He wanted to put things in order. He wanted to make sure all the colors were in the correct sequence. So that's kind of what life has been like for the past couple of years. Well, this year, in September, I turned 50. And on that day, you're going to think I'm lying, but this is absolutely true. I swear to you. I was spelling his name, and we've been trying to do sign language with him. And as I was spelling his name, he began to vocalize the letters, and he had not really done that before. And he put his whole name together, and he said, you could work it out. It wasn't perfect, but you could work out he was trying to vocalize his whole name. In weeks previous, he had increasingly started pointing to letters as we would go through and read "Pig takes a bath." He would point to each individual letter, B-A-T-H. Well, around about my 50th birthday, he began vocalizing and saying the letters. And he had not really, as I said, expressed interest in a lot of books for a long time, ever since he was a very, very tiny baby. So, in the weeks since, it was one afternoon, he often will reach up his hands to be picked up, right? So, and sometimes he wants to, like you pick him up, he wants to get into the snack cabinet, or he just wants to be picked up and carried around and held. He really likes that kind of stuff. But this day, he put his arms up, and it was in the evening. I'd gotten home from work, came home, and he put his arms up. I picked him up, and I was in his room, and he kind of moved his body. He kind of flung his body to one side, which he often does if he's trying to direct you. And I couldn't figure out what he was going for. So finally, we got a little bit closer to the shelves he was leaning for. And on the top of that shelf was where we had placed all of his books. And he, for the first time in years, reached for a book, pulled it down, and got it, and gave it to me. And we sat down and read it, and we went through the letters. We pointed B-A-T-H, bath, P-I-G-E, pig. And increasingly, he's started saying the letters, saying the words. And all he needed, at that time, what he wanted was to be picked up and sort of thrown at it, hurled at it, so he could get it. It's like that James Brown song, I don't want nobody to give me nothing, open up the door and I'll get it myself. Just lift him up, and he pulled the book off the shelf that he wanted. And whether it's a school library or a public library or a home library, that's what libraries do for us, is they lift us up when we're ready, when we're finally ready to go and get it, like he was finally ready to go and get it. All he needed was to be picked up. All he wanted was to be lifted up. Just give him a little bit of help, and he can pull it off the shelf for himself. And now he's going like gangbusters. He's, you know, reading words, he's spelling words, he's typing words out on the computer. He's finally ready. And when we're finally ready, maybe even sometimes before we know we're ready, libraries are there to give us the knowledge that's been collected, saved, kept back, so that when it's time for us to access it, when we're ready to access it, it'll be there. And any society, any culture that invests in a repository like that and a mission like that is going to be very deeply rewarded. And that's my time. Libraries. Thanks for listening. Hope you all are well.
Thank you, Eric. And I know I see a trip to the library in my future very soon. And I'm looking forward to finally meeting you in person one of these days. Thank you all for watching, and hope you follow us on social media, and you can catch up on our schedule at FestivALLCharleston.com. Our next episode is November 11th, and we have a very special episode where we will have a Three Things alumni bring on their kids to talk about the child's first favorite and future. And that lineup includes Sandra and Bonnie Gross, Jeff and Sylvia Pearson, and Leisha Lee and Deshanti Kay. So we're very excited about that. So that is November 11th. Again, I want to thank my sponsors, MVB Bank, Charleston Convention and Visitors Bureau, Taylor Books, West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Farmer Klein and Campbell, the University of Charleston, and of course, FestivALL. Thanks. I hope to catch you next time.
When I was young, I had a lot to say. So I learned how to sing, I learned how to play. You said you were mine when you heard my song. After all these years, you still sing along. The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things we'll never forget. Well, staring at my canvas with its misplaced strokes, I took it into town to show some folks. I was only after a little good advice, but their eyes lit up. They asked me, what's the price? The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things we'll never forget. An old pile of wood and a can of paint. You can see what it could be, not what it ain't. A blank piece of paper, a thought in your head. Say what you're saying till all you're saying is said. Oh, the first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things we'll never forget. The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things